If you had the opportunity to meet the perfect girl, what does that look like on paper?
How tall are you?
Stop everything, because if you thought family drama was on pause, think again. Kourtney Kardashian reportedly flips out after Scott Disick leaves a flirty comment under Khloé Kardashian's steamy post. And yes, this is the exact kind of messy private jet adjacent drama that fuels tabloids and podcasts for months. According to Ola, Scott wrote "hottie" under one of Khloé's recent Instagram shots, and fans, well, they lost it. Let's set the scene. Khloé posts a green two-piece from a Fabletics shoot showing off her abs. Fans gush, brands salivate, and in the comments, Scott Disick, who yes, was once Kourtney's on-again, off-again partner and the father of her 3 kids, drops a flirty "hottie" with an emoji. Ola captured the screenshot and the ensuing chatter. If you're picturing a dramatic DM sliding moment, don't. This is public theater. A short emoji, a single-word compliment, and the internet erects a scandal. But that's the point. The Kardashian orbit sells narrative friction, and a single emoji is enough to light the cultural fuse. Why does a comment matter? Because context is everything. Scott and Khloé have a long, weird shorthand. People reported on their candid podcast moments where they joked about whether they'd ever hook up, with both admitting the idea is crazy and annihilating to contemplate. Language the pair themselves used to describe how the family would react if anything romantic ever happened. That back and forth seats this emoji in a larger, decades-long cultural script. The initial reaction on social media was immediate. Fans reshared the screenshot, commentators called them soulmates in jest, and tabloids spun the scene into a potential romance rumor. The Sun, Yahoo, and a dozen gossip feeds picked up the thread and layered old receipts. Clips of Scott complimenting Khloé on past red carpet looks, throwback confessions on the Kardashians, and even the family's own running jokes about his supposed crush on Khloé. The echo chamber amplified the tiniest spark into a headline. Pause for a second and think about what we know. The comment itself was not coded as an invitation. It's a public, flirty compliment, yes, but also a repetitive pattern of Scott being the hype man in Khloé's comments. Ola points out that he's left flirty comments in the past, and people reminded audiences that both Khloé and Scott have publicly denied any hookups. They joked about the havoc it would wreak if it ever happened. So the line between friendship and flirtation for these two is intentionally blurry. That blurry performativity is crucial to the family's public brand. The Kardashians trade in intimacy and near exposure. They make almost moments into content. So what's one more comment? It becomes a tiny puzzle piece in a larger mythology. Fans wanting a rom-com fantasy read more into it. Shared laughs on podcasts, affectionate hugs on reality TV, bouquets from Scott during Tristan Thompson drama. All of these clips are raw material for a narrative that tabloids and fan accounts knit into soulmate lore. And of course, the family dynamics complicate everything. Kourtney and Scott's history is public and messy. A decade-long on-again, off-again relationship, 3 kids, and a co-parenting reality that's been played out on screens. People's profile of Scott and Khloé's dynamic notes the duo's long friendship, and Scott's past gross jokes and confessional moments on the Kardashians that teased flirtation but denied romance. An odd mix that keeps the rumor mill spinning. That living history gives the emoji more friction than it would in a vacuum. Now, let's address the core dramatic beat. Kourtney flipping out. Tabloid outlets like The Sun have previously reported on feuds between Kourtney and Scott over parenting in schools, citing things like disagreements about homeschooling and general friction in co-parenting decisions. Whether Kourtney actually flipped out visibly at this comment is where reporting diverges. Some outlets frame it as a big reaction, while others cite more muted, behind-the-scenes discomfort. That discrepancy matters because headlines are not the same as eyewitness accounts. Let's be honest, the tabloids sometimes do what tabloids do. They escalate. A comment becomes a crisis. A private eye roll becomes a rumored shouting match. Yahoo reported on instances of Kourtney rolling her eyes at narratives involving Scott's reinvention, which outlets then file under evidence of tension. But context is messy, and visual cues are ambiguous. A roll of the eyes at dinner is not a legal deposition, yet it becomes fodder, and editors love fodder. This is where the attention economy screws with nuance. Social media threads want a story arc: setup, betrayal, climax. Enter the emoji. Enter the screenshot. Enter the replays of past moments. Everyone wants an emotional through line. Is this flirtation, platonic bromance, or a deliberate spin to bait headlines? The answer is rarely binary, and that ambiguity is precisely why the comment does what comments always do. It pries open a conversation worth monetizing. There's also a gendered dimension worth calling out. Men in the public eye can be flirtatious without the same scrutiny that falls onto women for their private choices. Scott's flirting is often framed as him being himself, a roguish, jokey figure, whereas a woman replying or leaning into similar energy might be judged much harsher. When outlets highlight Scott's gross confessional moments in throwbacks, there's a wink. He's forgiven because the family narrative recasts him as the lovable screw-up. That leniency is part of why his comments land differently in the public imagination. Let's push the analysis. What does this show about the Kardashian PR machine? It shows efficiency. The family has long mastered the art of narrative triage: deny, deflect, or monetize. If Kourtney publicly flipped out, you'd expect a curated narrative shortly after. A staged interview, a quiet social media set piece, or a family dinner clip that reframes the spat. If she stays quiet, that's purposeful too. Silence is a PR move that denies the story oxygen. People have cataloged how both strategies are used to manage optics. Blink and you'll miss it. This could be a non-story blown up by harvestable outrage, or it could feed into a longer arc of internal family tension. Remember, The Sun reported past friction points between Kourtney and Scott over homeschooling and parenting approaches. So if there's simmering resentment, a flirtatious comment might be a pressure valve blowing off steam. But reporters and readers should be cautious when turning anecdote into indictment. Context often contradicts the immediate headline. There's also the cultural reflex to canonize soulmate pairings. The public loves forbidden possibilities. The ex who might be the one for someone else in the family. The friend who seems to fit romantically but would cause scandal. Fans online have long joked that Scott and Khloé are soulmates, and that meme life cycle ensures that any affectionate comment gets slotted into a pre-existing narrative template, which tabloids then amplify, making the joke feel more like a prophecy. Midpoint payoff. This tiny digital flirt reveals the choreography of modern fame. It's not about whether Scott is genuinely interested in Khloé. It's about how a family that built an empire on intimate exposure keeps producing saleable moments out of scraps. The hottie comment is both content and signal. Content for creators, signal for fans who crave narrative continuity, and a reminder that the Kardashians operate inside a feedback loop where whatever happens in the family is instantly translatable into lines for podcasts, headlines for tabloids, and clips for reaction channels. Now let's talk about the audience reaction, because that's where the story really metastasizes. People who love a rom-com fantasy will retell the soulmates narrative. Haters will weaponize the comment as proof of ongoing boundary issues. Neutral observers will treat it as a mildly entertaining blip. The split matters because it determines how long this will stick. If influencers, late-night hosts, and content creators decide to riff on it for a week, the memory will metastasize. If it fails to sustain viral velocity, it dies fast. Contrast Scott's public persona with Kourtney's current brand posture. Kourtney has leaned into domesticity, wellness, and a curated private life since marrying Travis Barker and expanding her family. She projects a kind of tightly managed stability. Scott, by contrast, plays the role of the irreverent ex who flirts and films and makes headlines without owning the caretaking identity. That polarity makes every exchange feel like a power play, and audiences read power plays like theater. Khloé's position is less ambiguous. She's publicly said she and Scott would be annihilated for hooking up, per People, and they've leaned into platonic banter on podcasts and in interviews. Khloé's brand has been shaped by resilience, motherhood, and entrepreneurship, and she's careful about how flirtation is framed. A casual compliment from Scott doesn't necessarily destabilize that. Instead, it usually lands as part of their ongoing friendly repartee. But of course, tabloids love to extrapolate. The Sun's piece on Kourtney and Scott's feuding over homeschooling injects a broader narrative seed: parenting friction. If a publication can connect a compliment to a deeper feud, it can sell an escalated story. Flirtation as strategic provocation amid co-parenting disagreements. That's a tidy line editors favor because it makes a cheap comment feel consequential. Whether the family actually experiences a meltdown, though, is another question. Let's be clear about ethical reporting. When a story depends on ambiguous social cues, an emoji, a roll of the eyes, a past confession, reporters must resist converting inference into fact. Some outlets temper their tone and present the hottie line as a playful moment. Others turn the same screenshot into an alleged scandal. The difference is editorial stance, not new information. Readers should always look for primary sources: the original Instagram comment, the podcast clip, the reality show footage, before making moral claims. Now, a quick production note. If Kourtney publicly flips out, expect a tight PR choreography. The family will either allow a quiet leak to shape a sympathetic narrative, or they'll stay silent and let the cycle fade. Historically, the Kardashians have used both strategies to manage optics. People and other outlets have cataloged this careful balance between confession and curation. If Kourtney wants to contain the story, silence and measured family content will do the job. If she wants to reclaim the narrative, expect a planned reveal. Let's escalate to cultural stakes. This tiny moment exposes the transactional anatomy of modern attention. The family is not just a collection of relationships, it's an entertainment product with reputations, deals, and measurable brand equity. Each seemingly private moment has market consequences, and every reaction is fodder for creators who monetize outrage. That's not just gossip anymore. It's the economy of intimacy. Also, note the gendered optics again. If any woman in this orbit leaned into flirtation with an ex's partner, she would likely be judged more harshly. Scott gets a pass as the charming instigator. Kourtney or Khloé would face different scrutiny. Those double standards matter because they shape the kinds of content that are acceptable and which are condemned, and the family's PR calculus responds accordingly. So what might happen next? 4 likely arcs: immediate social media jokes and memes, tabloid headlines trying to connect this to past feuds, a family-managed PR pivot, either silence or controlled content, and eventual dilution as the attention economy moves on. Prediction: this will trend for a short cycle and then fragment into reaction videos and meme dumps. The Kardashians live long-term. A single Instagram emoji won't topple them, but it will fuel content creators for a few days. Let's be candid about accountability versus clout chasing. There's room for genuine critique. If a person weaponizes flirtation to disrespect co-parenting boundaries or to manipulate family dynamics, that's worth discussing. But a one-word compliment in public, absent other evidence, is a weak peg on which to hang moral judgment. The difference between accountability and performative clout chasing is the difference between a sustained pattern and an isolated incident. Readers should demand evidence before turning jokes into character trials. Time for a media literacy pit stop. Be skeptical of outlets that frame speculation as revelation. Ola and People offered context. The Sun pushed a feuding narrative. Yahoo aggregated reaction. All of these moves are standard. If you want to know the facts, find the primary screenshots or clips. If you want to read the culture, read the long pattern. Both are valid, but they answer different questions. And now, the compassion note. These are real people with kids, careers, and reputations. Viral moments ricochet. A jokey hottie becomes headlines, which become memes, which become questions on talk shows. That friction can sting. So while we enjoy the content, we should keep in mind the human variables. Kids, co-parenting, and the stress of public parsing. The Kardashians built a business on exposure, but exposure has costs. Okay, let's give the timeline a quick, clean recap. Khloé posts the green Fabletics shoot. Scott leaves the flirty comment, fans notice and screenshot, tabloids pick it up and link to old jokes and podcast clips, and then the discourse branches into romance theory and parenting friction. That's the short version, and it's the version you can screenshot and skim in a minute. For the long version, you dig into the archive of confessions and friendly barbs. A few quick predictions about how the family will weather this. Kourtney may do nothing publicly and let the cycle fade. Kris or another family member might drop a sympathetic line on social media to nudge sentiment. Khloé will probably laugh it off publicly and keep the friendship frame strong. Each response option signals something about control and narrative ownership. This is a media theater, and everyone knows their cue. Now for the darker angle. This kind of story normalizes shallow conflict as entertainment. When the public derives pleasure from friends and exes being emotionally mined, we create incentives for people to extract private moments for content. That has ethical implications for co-parenting relationships, for children who grow up in the spotlight, and for the way we teach younger audiences to treat intimacy. It's worth asking if this is the cultural output we want to normalize. One more point about attention economics. Creators on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram will recycle this in predictable formats. Reaction videos, commentary clips, and meme montages. That microeconomy of creators turns a tabloid screenshot into a cascade of monetized views. And that cascade, in turn, extends the life of the story. The comment isn't just a flirty aside. It's a seed for an attention harvest. Let's unpack Scott himself a little. He's been a recurring figure in Kardashian lore for years. Headline fodder, confessional subject, and sometimes comic relief. People has chronicled his past struggles and public reckonings, noting how his history of substance abuse and self-described wild years became part of the family's televised narrative. Those confessions humanize him in one frame and make him an archetype, the flawed, forgiven ex in another, which complicates public judgment when he acts flirtatiously online. It's also worth remembering the kids. Scott shares Mason, Penelope, and Rain with Kourtney, and the co-parenting calculus is forever humming under any story that involves him and the family. The Sun's reporting about disagreements over homeschooling is exactly the kind of background that makes a comment feel charged. If there is tension over parenting, every public bit of flirtation looks like a provocation rather than a joke. Those are the stakes that tabloids exploit because they map private friction onto public spectacle. We should also look at the pattern of Scott performing as the family booster. He compliments, he jokes, he attends events, and he sometimes expresses affection in ways that are framed as harmless, but read as flirtatious under a microscope. The public sees the pattern, stitches it into a narrative, and then treats each new instance as corroboration. That cumulative logic is powerful. A dozen minor compliments can look like serial flirtation when the media plays curator. From a PR lens, responses are instructive. If Kourtney answers publicly, she risks dragging the family into a long social media back and forth. If she ignores, she risks being framed as secretly wounded. Both paths have trade-offs in an era where attention translates to brand metrics. The family's handlers understand this calculus, and their past behavior suggests a preference for quiet containment, unless amplification serves a larger purpose. Late-night comedians and podcast hosts will likely have a field day. These moments become cultural shorthand. A flirty comment turns into a punchline, which then becomes a meme, which then becomes a segment that rewrites the narrative for broader audiences. The velocity of that feedback loop is new. 20 years ago, a headline faded in a week. Now, a screenshot can spawn 1,000 clips and remain mimetic for months. Creators benefit from that half-life, and the family benefits indirectly because attention begets relevance. Finally, consider brand risk. Brands don't like sustained negative sentiment around talent or spokespeople. While this Instagram moment is probably not material to Khloé's multi-million-dollar deals, cumulative controversy can make partnership executives twitchy. Brand teams monitor sentiment spikes, and while a single emoji is unlikely to result in a contract pause, a steady drumbeat of tabloid headlines can change the calculus over time. That's why the family's PR apparatus treats even small items with strategic seriousness. So, enjoy the drama, but also consider what attention does to private lives. This culture sells curated intimacy and then pretends to be surprised when it gets messy. Hold that thought, because tomorrow the cycle will start all over again. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.